and visiting now with Wes Rucker from Vols 247. We look ahead to Arkansas and Tennessee coming up Saturday night in Fayetteville. Wes, how you doing?
Doing all right, guys. Just a standard normal day here in America. Nothing big going on.
Not a thing.
No
hey,
big
do you know
news.
your blood type? We're trying to. Most people don't. Do you know your blood type?
I actually should, but I don't. My mom, who's the dean of a health school, would be really upset with me for that answer. But off the top of my head, I don't know.
Okay, all right. We won't tell her.
That's right. Maybe she won't hear this. All right. Well, let's look at this Tennessee journey through this season. Well, we'll just sum it up for us. How this thing has been interesting to say the least, as always, over in Knoxville.
Yeah, it's kind of been two seasons in one, really. For the first 10 quarters of the season, Tennessee didn't turn the ball over a single time, and it opened the season with the win at South Carolina, took Mizzou behind the woodshed, and then had a lead at Georgia at halftime. Things looking okay there. That's kind of like the team that I think a lot of us thought Tennessee would be this season. And then sort of the bottom fell out. Just they started turning the ball over left and right, and since then, nothing has gone the way anyone around here wants it to go. It's been really disappointing for a lot of people because I think it's been self-inflicting as much as anything. It's not been like they went into the season turning it over, and then they kind of got it better. It's been the other way around, right? They were a little bit cleaner to begin the season. Since then, it's just kind of been falling apart, and it's kind of tough to figure out where they are right now.
You mentioned the name Jarrett Guarantano to a Tennessee fan, and they kind of they cringe and they tense up a little bit. I mean, this poor kid's been a lightning rod since he got there. I don't think he played. He has moments where you want to look at him and go, "Where's your head, man?" But there are throws that he makes where there's times he looks pretty good, and then there's other times where the wheels come off.
Yeah, he makes throws. I think you put it right. He makes throws that I don't think there are many starting quarterbacks in the country who can make. I really do believe that. When he makes some of those deep throws, he's got great arm strength. He can put it right where it needs to be. And a lot of the time he looks like that kind of a player. But when the wheels come off the bus for him, they really, really fall off. And he makes turnovers in bunches. He just has plays that they just come at the worst time, and a lot of them make no sense at all. Sometimes you can look at a throw and be like, okay, the receiver was supposed to zig and he zagged. That's really his fault, not the quarterback's. Those kind of things, they happen, and when you watch film, you see that stuff. But a lot of his decisions, you can see as he's making them, what in the hell are you doing? It's almost like the ball's leaving his arm, and you go, that's not good. That's not good. And I guess from the press box, we get kind of an eagle-eye view anyway, so we can see that stuff easier than you can see it on the field sometimes. But when he makes mistakes, they really, really cost Tennessee. And that's been, I think 4 defensive touchdowns they've allowed in the last 3 games. You can't win doing that. I mean, I think they've had 11 turnovers, and 10 have either been returned for a touchdown or they've had the ball starting in field goal range. You just can't win games doing that. You're never going to win football games doing that.
Given that, and with the week off, how close are we to seeing Harrison Bailey, the big prize recruit?
That depends on who you ask, to be frank. I think as long as this game or this season is within reach in terms of them putting together a pretty good season, I don't think they'll make a change at quarterback. I know that people keep wanting me to say that, and I keep saying, guys, I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. It may not be what you want to hear, but it's what I'm hearing, and it's that they believe Jarrett Guarantano gives them the best chance to win football games. And when he's playing right, he absolutely is their best quarterback in terms of getting them results now. But, the question is, he makes mistakes that a lot of times will get somebody else pulled, and he gets more chances. And I think that's what's frustrating a lot of people is that, well, if you know what's going to happen with him, why are you going back to him? And it's because they feel like he's the guy who gives them the best chance to win. So until that changes, he's going to be their quarterback. And so unless, this game gets to be within, 20, 30 points either way in the second half, I don't know that Tennessee will make a change.
Talking with Wes Rucker from Vols 247 here on Ruscin Zach. So outside of Guarantano, what else is just give us kind of a snapshot of the rest of the offense. The offensive line, are they good? Have they struggled? Just kind of how have you seen them through 5 games?
Well, Tennessee's offensive line was supposed to be one of the best in college football coming into the season. And I know that's a mouthful, but when you talk to NFL scouts, they'll tell you the same thing. There's 4 or 5 star prospects on that line. A lot of those guys are going to be paid good money to play at the next level. They ought to be a pretty good offensive line, right? Stands to reason. They've kind of been erratic, though. That's been a real disappointment. I think run blocking's been okay, but pass protection I don't think has been very consistent. Now, it was a lot better in that way against Alabama. And this Alabama team is great. It doesn't rush the passer as well as it has the past couple of years, but you know what kind of athletes you're dealing with there. And I think in 25 dropbacks, they only had 1 sack allowed in that game, or 0 sacks and 1 pressure, I should say. So that was better. Receiver, Tennessee's always got players. Tennessee still has players. Even though Jennings and Callaway are gone, they've got a crop of newcomers that can really, really run. And they've got a couple older guys like Palmer and Johnson who are just good football players. Not much to speak of at the tight end position. Tennessee's kind of in the transition year there, and the guy who would be the starter is hurt. And right now, at running back, that's where they're getting a lot of their production. Ty Chandler and Eric Gray are both very good running backs. I don't know if they're All-America types or anything, but they're certainly really good running backs, and they're guys who Tennessee wants to get the ball to as much as possible.
You mentioned Eric Gray. That's a guy Arkansas wanted very badly in their backfield. I watched him a little bit against Tennessee, watched him against Kentucky. This guy is, he's a sophomore. He could be one of those guys that's a difference maker for them because he's one of those guys, he can catch it a little bit and he can run it.
Yeah, he is, and both of Tennessee's running backs, and again, I'm not saying either one of these guys is Alvin Kamara. I'm not.
Nobody is.
I'm dumb, but I'm not that dumb. I'm not that dumb, but I'm dumb. But they kind of are both in that mold. They're both guys who they might surprise you with their power, and I think both do that at times. But they're really just versatile backs. They can play in the slot. They can play kind of as a traditional running back, a tailback. There's a lot of different things. You can put them both on the field at the same time too, and that can give defenses some tough stuff to look at there. But Gray is definitely a guy who, at the end of last season, against kind of Indiana, which is a pretty solid Indiana team, and Vanderbilt, he was just wiping the floor with those guys. And at times this season, he's looked really good too. I think he will probably end up being the guy who was the leading rusher at the end of the year. I know Chandler's had that title the past couple seasons, and Chandler is incredibly fast. If Ty Chandler gets behind you, you're probably not going to catch him. But Gray has a little bit more wiggle to him. Gray's a guy who can get into the open spaces a little bit better, and he's a guy that, if he's not touching the ball 20 times on Saturday, something's wrong.
Wes, let's go to the other side here, and as Felipe Franks looks into that Tennessee defense, what's that? How have they performed so far this year?
Not quite as good as I thought they would have, to be honest with you, because I think Jeremy Pruitt is one of the best defensive coaches in college football. The guy was, waiting in the wings to get any number of decent head coaching jobs for years because he's a really good defensive coordinator and a good recruiter. And then Derek Ansley, their defensive coordinator now, was the NFL's highest paid defensive backs coach 2 years ago. So they're really well coached normally on that of the ball. They've just been a little bit inconsistent. Henry To'oTo'o there at inside linebacker, he's a stud. He's all over the place, makes all kinds of plays. But whoever lines up next to him in that 3-4 there at inside backer, they've had some questions there. And I think really the places that have been disappointing have been the defensive line, where they returned a whole bunch of players. It got so bad there, they actually got rid of the defensive line coach 2 games ago. And that was 4 games into his career.
In the middle of the game, right?
Coach. Yeah, that depends on who you ask. It was done by the next morning at the very latest. I'm comfortable saying that. Whether it happened during the game, I don't know for sure. I know he finished the game, but, bottom line is by the next day, he was out. So, yeah, that was a disappointment. They can play better there. But I think in the back end, too, they've returned a lot of guys there. They've got 3, I think, pretty darn good cornerbacks. They're replacing an all-SEC guy at safety in Nigel Warrior, and they've just not been quite as good as I thought they would be there. But they've still got pieces there, and they've still got talent, but they have really struggled defending the pass over the middle of the field. Down the sidelines, those corners, I think they're usually pretty good. But at safety, they just, safety, the nickel spot, any of the linebackers in pass defense, anywhere over the middle of the field, if that's a throw Felipe Franks is comfortable making, and he's got guys who are comfortable going over the middle, there are plays to be made there against Tennessee.
Tennessee's been outscored 75-73 in their games in the first half. The second half, it's 90-38. that tells me one of two things. Either the strength and conditioning isn't very good, they're not making coaching adjustments, or the depth isn't there. Is it any one of those things from what you see?
I don't think that it's a depth issue, really. I think they're actually deeper than they have been. I think they've come out in the third quarter and they've made really, really bad plays. It sounds really stupid when you say it that simply, but they have been really bad in the third quarter. They have had a lot of turnovers. They've had turnovers returned for touchdowns. They've just not executed in the third quarter. And it's one of those things that I don't know if you can say it's that the coaches are or are not making adjustments, because the players are just out there making horrible mistakes in the third quarter. And you can't really coach around that. You can tell a guy where to throw it, but, if it's not there, don't throw it there. Block the guy in front of you. By the way, don't give the ball to Alabama and let them return 30 yards for a touchdown. Not normally what you want to be doing. So, it's hard for me to say that it's that, because Tennessee has actually been a pretty decent team in terms of those halftime adjustments that people talk about all the time, and I think sometimes too much. But Tennessee's been pretty good at that, I thought, last year. I think this year it's been much different, and I really can't quite put my finger on it, because I think this has been a pretty well-coached football team, at least it was last season. This year, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the fact that they just didn't adjust as well as others have with COVID and missing time. I know they had a ton of guys miss a ton of time in camp. I don't know if that's what it is. But whatever it is, something's just not been right there in the third quarter especially.
No. One of the numbers I always look at is third down conversions. Defense has given up 47% on third downs. They're 33 out of 70. But on offense, they're converting at 26%. That's a correlation right there. You're kicking the football away. The crazy number is on fourth down, they're converting at like 67%. Third down conversions to me is a big thing. And if you're giving up third downs, it means the sticks keep moving and drives continue. This defense, 33 points a game, over 400 yards total offense, it feels like it's sort of a listing ship here.
Yeah, it is. And, you can look at not time of possession. You can look at, total yards. You can look at some of the lengths of these touchdown drives Tennessee's giving up. And a lot of them, it's because the other team is scoring on defense or because they've been given a short field. That's not really necessarily on the defense. But third down defense is very much on the defense. That's something they do control, and that's something that they need to control better. And I think, honestly, sometimes they've left teams in some third and short situations, which is obviously advantage offense a lot of times. They've just not made plays. Mac Jones, I think, completed 25 of 31 passes or something like that against Tennessee. They had a big day, whole bunch of yards, touchdowns. But he threw at least 3, maybe 4 passes that should have been intercepted. Not could have been intercepted, should have been intercepted. And they didn't make the plays. And a couple of them, they let the ball go through their hands and Bama makes the catch. So that's kind of a double whammy, because you're not only not getting off the field, you're not only not giving the ball back to your offense, you're also helping the other team put points on the board. So football teams are, you win and lose games, same places people talk about all the time, right? Turnovers, third down both ways, and red zone both ways. If you can be good in 2 of those 3 areas, you usually got a pretty good chance to win games. Tennessee's not been consistently good in any of those 3 areas, and that's why this team that should be a 3-2 team right now is 2-3.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fascinating as always. Coming up on Saturday, Wes Rucker's our guest, Vols 247 here on Ruscin Zach.
Jeremy Pruitt's 15-15. Yeah, are you starting to hear some rumblings just with some of the things that have come out? Firing your coach at halftime, that sort of thing. Big losses to Alabama. He seems like a guy that is kind of prickly to deal with. Is there some rumbling about him not being the guy?
I don't think you're hearing that yet. Now, if they go lose at Arkansas, which is a game that Tennessee fans in the preseason thought, well, that's a game you got to win. If they lose that game, okay, now you've lost that game and Kentucky. You still got some tough games down the stretch. At that point, it starts to get a little bit nervier, I guess. I don't think anything will happen in kind of this weird COVID year anyway. I don't think Tennessee. I think the bottom would have to truly completely fall out for Tennessee to want to do something like that, because they've been recruiting well. It's kind of a weird year. You can be a little bit more forgiving in a year like this, but this is still Tennessee football. This is a place where anytime you lose to anyone for any reason, this is a metro area of 1 million people that gets really unhappy really quickly. So that's part of it. Losing makes you crazy, and Tennessee fans have been going crazy for 12 years now. This is way too long for this program to not be what it should be. So I don't think it gets to that point yet, but it certainly would put a lot more pressure on him going into next year, if nothing else, because I think it's interesting. A lot of people talk about Pruitt maybe being a little pricklish, and I understand why you say that, because a lot of people say the same thing. I actually have not had that at all. Obviously I'm a guy who just covers him. I kind of like the guy. I think he's, for the most part, he's been pretty upfront about things, pretty honest. Now, I don't have to work for him. If I did, maybe I'd say that differently. Maybe if I was getting the paint peeled off the walls every day, maybe it wouldn't be fun for me. But I enjoy covering this guy a lot more than I enjoyed covering his predecessor, that's for sure.
Wes Rucker, Vols 247 with us here on Ruscin and Zach. Should be a good one. Thank you, Wes, as always.
No problem. Anytime, guys.
All right. Wes Rucker, our guest here on Ruscin and Zach. 6:30 Saturday night at the Dawn as Arkansas takes on
is that what we're calling
Tennessee.
it now?
I've been calling it that for a long time. It never sticks, but I don't care. I'm committed to it.